Forced by the pressures of life, the man had no choice but to come to the street market to make a living. Unfortunately, although many pedestrians passed by, none of them were willing to stop for him. An elderly man, seeing his plight, tossed him some leftover bread, but for an adult, this was clearly just a drop in the bucket. So, unable to fill his stomach, he could only rummage through trash cans, competing with stray dogs and rats for food. But today, luck didn't seem to be on his side. He couldn't find anything edible in the trash cans either. With no other choice, he walked into a fast food restaurant and ordered the cheapest meal on the menu. But even for this meal, which cost only 3 yen, he was still 9 cents short after pulling all his savings together. So he planned to play a song for the owner to make up for the amount he was short. But the owner would rather throw the meal away than sell it to him at a discount, and even urged him to leave with harsh words. However, at that moment, the owner could never have imagined that this homeless man he looked down on would soon become a household name in the area, with a net worth at least 100 times greater than his own. And what's more, this is a true story. The man's name was James. Unlike other homeless people, he still had a living father. Although his father wasn't wealthy, he wasn't so poor that he couldn't afford a meal. However, the father and son did not live together. James was a complete addict, talking about quitting drugs for 8 years, but never succeeding. Eventually, his father couldn't take it and kicked him out. Without his father's support, he wandered from place to place, making a living singing on the streets. However, judging by how skillfully he rummaged through trash cans, he was going hungry, barely eating 3 meals in 9 days. That night, after being kicked out of the fast food restaurant, James hadn't gone far when he met an old friend. The friend invited him into an unlocked car and handed him a small packet of powder. James, who was trying to quit drugs, shook his head to refuse, but resolve lasted only a moment, then he tossed it aside. The two of them spent the night dazed in the car until the next morning when the car owner's angry questioning woke the friend. He hurriedly tried to wake James so they could leave, but James was unresponsive, as if gone into shock. Seeing this, the friend had no choice but to abandon him and flee alone. By the time James woke up, he had already been taken to the hospital for treatment. Facing the addiction specialist who rushed over after hearing the news, James felt deeply ashamed, having messed up his rehab plan again. The doctor originally had no intention of helping someone so full of lies, but seeing the utter heartbreak on James's face, in the end, he softened and told James to go see her as soon as he was discharged from the hospital. James wasn't discharged until 3 days later. The doctor also created a new detox plan for him. After signing the agreement, he was able to receive a free dose of medication every day to help ease the pain of withdrawal. To show his gratitude, James specially performed a song for the doctor. It was precisely because of this song that the doctor used his only available spot to help the homeless James apply for a place in the shelter, because he heard a glimmer of hope in James's singing. Although James's life had hit rock bottom, he never gave up hope for a better life. When James walked into the shelter, he could hardly believe what he saw before his eyes. Everything here was fully equipped, not a single essential item was missing. He had never imagined that a homeless person like himself could live in such a place. Overwhelmed with excitement, he didn't know how to thank the doctor, but the doctor told him there was no need to say anything. He just needed to promise to stick with his treatment.
I promise you. Cross my heart, hope to die.
Okay.
After Dr. Song left with nothing else to do, James lay down in the bathtub. He planned to reward himself with a relaxing hot shower. But just then, he suddenly heard something knocked over in the kitchen. He thought there was a burglar, so he grabbed his biochemical weapon and headed toward the kitchen. But when he turned on the light, he discovered the burglar was an adorable orange tabby cat. The little guy must have been starving, which is why it snuck in through the window looking for food. James's heart softened. Even though the kitten ruined his breakfast for the next week, he didn't chase it away. On the contrary, he thoughtfully poured it some milk. The scene reminded him of his former self. There was a time when he too was so hungry he'd search everywhere for food, just like the kitten. He had deeply experienced that pain and helplessness, which made him empathize with the kitten even more. However, James never expected that after eating and drinking its fill, the kitten refused to leave and insisted on staying. Helpless, James had no choice but to let it stay for the night. Early the next morning, James took the kitten and went door to door, hoping to return it to its original owner. But after searching the neighborhood, no one claimed it. It was then that James realized the kitten was probably a stray, so he had no choice but to let it go on its own. After all, given his current financial situation, he could barely support himself, let alone take care of another cat. After picking up his daily medication at the pharmacy, James chose the subway entrance as his spot to perform. But the security here seemed to have little tolerance for street performers like him. Before James could finish his song, they asked him to leave, citing that he was blocking the emergency exit. James's father passed by and witnessed the scene, but he showed no intention of acknowledging his son. He quickened his pace to leave. However, James eventually spotted him and called out, "Dad, Dad," from a distance. His father stopped and stayed for a moment. James shared the good news with his father that he was undergoing drug rehabilitation and expressed his wish to return home for Christmas to have a family dinner together. But before his father could say anything, his stepmother walked over from not far away and said there was no room left at home. She then hurried James's father to leave quickly. This made his father feel quite guilty, so before leaving he slipped James $20 for living expenses. James originally wanted to refuse, but after considering his current financial situation, he silently accepted his father's help. However, when he returned to his old apartment, he saw that the orange cat that had left in the morning had actually come back. The cat was badly injured, most likely having been attacked while out looking for food. James hurriedly and carefully picked it up, wanting to find someone to help save the cat. Poor little kitten. It just so happened that at this moment, it saw its female neighbor, James. She had been seen walking several large dogs before, so it seemed she had some experience taking care of pets. Sure enough, when she learned that the little ginger kitten was injured, she immediately called James over to bring it into her house. The woman introduced herself as Betty, a volunteer at a nearby animal hospital. However, after she examined the kitten's condition, she found that its wounds had already become infected, and only a visit to the animal hospital could provide better treatment. James immediately, without hesitation, took the little one and rushed over there. After 2 hours of waiting in line, the kitten's wounds were finally treated. But what James didn't expect was that the medical expenses turned out to be as high as £22, which was equivalent to his entire week's living expenses. James took out a pile of coins from his pocket, hoping to gain some sympathy as a homeless man, but the nurse's expression seemed to say that even if the King of Heaven himself showed up today, it would still have to be £22. With no other choice, James had to hand over the money his father had given him for support as well. However, when he got back, the kitten was extremely resistant to medicine. No matter what methods James tried, gentle or forceful, the kitten simply refused. Out of options, James had no choice but to turn to Betty again, as she was experienced in pet care. He really does have a way with things. Just like coaxing the child, with just a few words he managed to get the cat to take his medicine. He himself was also very fond of this little orange cat, and even gave it a special name, Bob. After a few days of recovery, Bob's injuries showed clear signs of improvement. Seeing this, James originally planned to let it return to the wild, since he still needed to go out and earn a living, and really didn't have time to take care of it. After waving goodbye to Bob, he turned and left, unaware that as soon as he walked away, Bob quietly followed him all the way, even sneaking onto the bus with him. When Bob suddenly jumped into his arms, James was both surprised and delighted, and finally made up his mind to adopt the little cat. And so, the man and the cat arrived at the bustling pedestrian street together. James was worried that Bob might run around everywhere, so he tried to get him to jump onto his shoulder. To his surprise, Bob really understood the command and leapt up right away. This unique pairing immediately attracted the attention of many passers-by. Girls who loved cats even came up to ask for photos, and the innocent children were even more excited when they saw them. With Bob's addition, James's busking career suddenly took a significant turn for the better. Before, he'd spend the day with barely anyone stopping by. Now, crowds gathering to watch or a sea of people. Whenever a kind person tipped them, Bob was always extremely. He bowed his head humbly to express his thanks. This adorable and polite gesture instantly made the onlookers even more captivated. When counting the tips after the performance, James could hardly believe it. He had made as much in just half a day as he used to earn in a whole month. This was practically his lucky charm. So in order to repay this lucky charm who brought him such good fortune, James spent most of the money on food for him, while he himself was content with just enough to get by. But what Bob brought him was far more than just luck. Every time the neighbors saw this man and cat duo near the apartment, Betty, the woman next door, would take the initiative to greet them. Over time, the two became more familiar. Sometimes when she saw James coming back late from busking, Betty would invite him over for dinner. So Bob also played an indispensable role in James's romantic luck. However, just as James was about to head out to work that day, an old friend suddenly showed up. This friend had seen James making a lot of money on the street, and now wanted James to help him out financially. James originally didn't want to have anything more to do with these addicts, but when he heard that the other person hadn't eaten for 2 days, he couldn't bear it. He took out $10, and before leaving, reminded his friend to use it only for food. But while his friend agreed, when James returned home that evening, he gave. Seeing him unconscious ground and judging items scattered at scene clear it overdose, James, seeing, quickly called to passers-by help and asked to call an ambulance. Betty, inside the house, heard the cries for help and rushed, but after checking on her friend, she realized it was too late. Watching the body being carried away on a stretcher, Betty was suddenly overwhelmed by painful memories. She told James that her own brother had also died in the same way, which is why she had always deeply resented people who used drugs. James fell silent. He had originally planned to tell Betty the truth about his situation, but now, if she found out he was also an addict, there would probably be no further connection between them. So he could only choose to continue hiding this from her. The next day happened to be the annual Christmas holiday, and both of them had carefully prepared gifts for each other. Watching the two of them embrace, Bob silently swallowed a huge dose of dog food. After spending a sweet afternoon with Betty, James took Bob and planned to go home to visit his father. However, when he opened the door and his father saw it was James, he didn't seem very welcoming. Even his two half-sisters were unfriendly toward him. "Mom doesn't like you. Mom says you're an addict." James was very angry about this. James was about to explain he had already started to quit, but Bob suddenly poked his head out, causing his sister to scream, as she was allergic to cat fur. Her screams frightened Bob, making him dash around, and with the stepmother's furious yelling, the house instantly descended into chaos. In the end, James could only leave with Bob, looking apologetic. The warm family gathering he had imagined was completely ruined, but unfortunately that wasn't the only bad thing to happen. The next day when he went out to busk on the street, a man walked by with his dog and the dog peed right on James's backpack. The dog's owner showed no apology, even provoking James. Onlookers couldn't stand it, pushing the man to leave, but things escalated into a brawl. Police quickly arrived, stopped the fight, and surveillance footage proved James innocent. Still, he was punished, banned from busking for 6 months. This sudden turn of events was hard for James to accept. When the doctor came to bail him out and saw he was losing control, he hurriedly told him to go to the pharmacy and take his medication. To everyone's surprise, Betty came to the pharmacy to buy something and saw her boyfriend was also an addict. Her face was disappointment. James hurriedly caught up and explained that he hadn't touched that stuff for 3 months and that he would be able to quit it completely soon. But Betty had already heard similar words countless times before. The end result was that her brother lost his life because of it, so she no longer wanted to believe any addict's promises, telling James to come back only when he had truly succeeded. In just one day, James lost both his love and his career, and his life instantly plunged back into rock bottom. With no source of income, the money he had saved up dwindled day by day. In the end, he could barely afford to feed himself, let alone buy cat food for Bob. But fortunately, this time he didn't just sit and wait for things to get worse. Instead, he took the initiative to find himself a job selling magazines. Although he didn't earn as much as he did from busking, thanks to Bob's presence, many passers-by would buy a magazine from him in advance just to take a photo with Bob. For a while, this made his sales go quite smoothly. However, the good times didn't last long. One day, a mother and her child suddenly showed up, wanting to buy Bob from him. Of course, James refused, but the woman wouldn't give up and insisted that James sell Bob to her. Their argument immediately attracted the attention of a large dog nearby, which started barking furiously. Frightened, Bob suddenly bolted, and as soon as he ran, the big dog chased after him. This made Bob more panicked, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the bustling crowd. James searched as he went, asking passers-by for information, but even as night fell, he still couldn't find any trace of Bob. James was nearly driven mad with worry. To him, Bob was not just a pet, but family. Bob hadn't come home for 2 days in a row, leaving James feeling as if he'd lost his soul. Even the doctor began to worry about his mental state, because for people recovering from addiction, emotions can easily become overwhelming and lead to a loss of reason. Sure enough, on the 3rd night, as James watched the people outside selling jelly beans, some troubling thoughts suddenly crossed his mind. As he approached, the 2 vendors immediately asked him what he wanted. James hesitated for a moment.
I want my cat. I'm looking for a ginger cat. Have you seen it anywhere?
The whole thing sounds simple, but the process was extremely painful. On just the first day, his emotions were already out of control. He felt restless, as if tens of thousands of ants were biting him all over. On the 2nd day, his body reacted abnormally. Sometimes he felt extremely hot, erupting like a volcano, other times freezing cold, as if in an icy wilderness. Starting from the 3rd day, he developed a severe aversion to food. Not only could he not eat, but he also felt nauseous and kept retching. On top of that, it felt as if an invisible giant hand was gripping his heart, causing so much pain he couldn't sleep through the night. Fortunately, after enduring 7 days of torment, Bob by his side, he gritted his teeth and made it through. When the first rays of morning sunlight streamed into the room, the brilliant light not only symbolized the good news of his successful recovery from addiction, but also felt like a sign from above, acknowledging his unwavering determination. He finally overcame the darkness that had once haunted him, no longer looking haggard and worn out. Unbeknownst to him, his soul had been reborn, and he once again felt the beauty of the world. The first thing he did was find his doctor and give him a big hug, because without the doctor's trust and support, there would never have been the transformed James of today. Next, he went to see his father, and proudly told him the news that he had successfully quit drugs. His father silently embraced him from behind. He took a photo out of his wallet. It was of James when he was a child. It turned out he had never given up on James. He just didn't know how to help his son, and felt he hadn't fulfilled his responsibilities as a father, which had always made him feel ashamed. But now, things were different. When his wife questioned him from inside the house, he could finally answer her openly.
I'm talking to my son.
What surprised James even more was that someone had uploaded a video of him singing on the street, and in just a few days, it had garnered over 10,000 views. Many people were moved by the story between him and Bob. Some publishers even approached James hoping to turn this heartwarming and inspiring experience into a book. Naturally, James did not refuse. As a result, not long after, a book titled A Street Cat Named Bob was published, and it quickly became a hit among readers as soon as it was released. James, who was once a homeless street performer, was suddenly transformed into a best-selling author. In the film, the person asking for an autograph at the new book launch is none other than the protagonist of the story, James Bowen. And in the film, the stray cat is actually played by Bob himself. His appearance is like a ray of light in a dark world. Not only he once brought James all the hope he needed to keep living, and even strengthened his resolve to change his life by drinking like a gentleman. Perhaps in each of our lives there is also such a light. Its appearance may not bring us any tangible help, but it can give us the courage and hope to stand up again when we are at our lowest point. Just like how Bob gave James a second chance, I hope that everyone, when they stumble, can meet their own cat and find the strength to pick themselves up again.